8-year-old Liam sprinted across the park, his sneakers kicking up tufts of grass as he chased after a rogue soccer ball. The golden afternoon sun bathed the playground in a warm glow, laughter and chatter filling the air. Just as he reached for the ball, something caught his eye. A dark leather wallet, slightly worn, lay half buried in the grass near a park bench. Liam hesitated. His mother had always told him that if he ever found something that wasn't his, he should turn it in. But as he bent down and picked it up, curiosity got the best of him. He flipped it open. His eyes widened. Inside were crisp $100 bills, lots of them. More money than he had ever seen in his life. His small fingers trembled as he counted, losing track after the 5th bill. But it wasn't just money. There were credit cards, a driver's license, and a folded photograph of a smiling family, 2 kids and a man with kind eyes. Liam's heart pounded. This wasn't just a lost wallet. Someone, somewhere, was desperately looking for it. But what should he do? His friends were still playing, unaware of what he had found. For a fleeting second, the thought crossed his mind. What if I just kept it? No one saw me pick it up. But then another thought followed. What if this money was important? What if someone needed it? Liam bit his lip, staring at the wallet, the weight of the decision settling on his small shoulders. And that's when he heard the voice behind him. "Hey kid, what you got there?" Liam turned around slowly, his grip on the wallet tightening. A man stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, eyes locked onto the wallet. He wasn't the man from the photograph, and something about him didn't feel right. Liam's heart pounded as he clutched the wallet tighter. The man standing before him had a scruffy beard, tired eyes, and a jacket that looked too big for his frame. Something about the way he watched Liam made the little boy uneasy. "Found something interesting there, huh?" the man asked, forcing a smile. His voice was casual, but his eyes told a different story. They were focused, sharp, too interested in what Liam held. Liam swallowed. He knew better than to talk to strangers, but he also didn't want to be rude. "It's just a wallet," Liam said hesitantly, glancing at the photograph inside once more. The man took a step closer. "That's a lot of money for a kid to be holding. Why don't I help you take care of it?" Liam's grip on the wallet tightened. "I think I should find the owner." The man chuckled, but it didn't sound friendly. "Maybe I am the owner." Liam frowned. That wasn't true. He had seen the driver's license inside. The name wasn't this man's. The stranger sighed and crouched to Liam's level. "Look, kid, someone else might take that wallet from you. How about you give it to me and I'll handle it? I'm an adult. You can trust me." Liam felt his stomach twist. His mother always told him to trust his instincts, and right now his instincts were screaming at him to get away. "I need to go," Liam said quickly, backing up a step. But the man's hand shot out, gripping Liam's wrist, not hard, but enough to make him freeze. "Hey," the man said, his voice lower now, no longer friendly. "Let's not make a scene, all right?" Liam's breath came faster. His eyes darted around the park, looking for someone, anyone who could help. And then he spotted her, an older woman sitting on a bench, reading a book. She hadn't noticed them yet, but she was close enough that if he shouted, Liam made his decision in an instant. "Help! This man is trying to take something from me," he yelled, his voice cutting through the sounds of the park. Heads turned. Parents, kids, joggers, everyone looked. The man's eyes widened in panic. He released Liam's wrist instantly. "Geez, kid, you didn't have to yell." Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, fast. Liam stood frozen for a moment, heart hammering. The older woman rushed over. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Liam nodded, still gripping the wallet. I need to find who this belongs to." She looked at him, then at the wallet, and smiled. "Let's do that together." But neither of them knew yet. Finding the owner of this wallet was going to lead to something far bigger than either of them could imagine. Liam sat on the bench beside the older woman, still gripping the wallet tightly. His heart was still racing from the encounter with the strange man, but he felt safer now. The woman smiled kindly. "I'm Mrs. Peterson," she said. "You did the right thing back there, young man. That was very brave." Liam nodded but kept his focus on the wallet. "I need to find who it belongs to." Mrs. Peterson adjusted her reading glasses. "Let's take a look, shall we?" Liam carefully opened the wallet again. There was a driver's license tucked inside. He pulled it out and read the name. Michael Reynolds, age 42. Address 223 Maplewood Drive. Liam's eyes widened. "That's not far from here." Mrs. Peterson nodded. "That's only a few streets away." Liam then pulled out the photograph again. A man, Michael Reynolds presumably, was smiling, arms wrapped around two young children, a boy and a girl. They looked happy, a warm, loving family. Something about the picture made Liam feel even more determined. "I think he has kids," Liam said softly. "What if this money was for something important?" Mrs. Peterson patted his shoulder. "There's only one way to find out. We return it." Liam checked inside the wallet again and found something else. A receipt, crumpled but readable, from a nearby gas station. The timestamp was from earlier that morning. "He was here today," Liam murmured. "Not too long ago." Mrs. Peterson stood up. "Come on, Liam. Let's take a little trip to Maplewood Drive." Liam took a deep breath and nodded. He had no idea that this decision would change everything. Liam walked beside Mrs. Peterson as they made their way down the quiet streets toward 223 Maplewood Drive. His small fingers still clutched the wallet tightly, as if he were holding something priceless. The walk wasn't long, but every step made Liam more curious. Who was Michael Reynolds? Why did he have so much money in his wallet? And why did that strange man want it so badly? Finally, they arrived at the house. It was small but well kept, with a white picket fence and a neatly trimmed lawn. The porch light was on, even though it was daytime. Something about the house seemed sad. Liam and Mrs. Peterson walked up the steps, and Liam hesitated before knocking on the door. What if the owner wasn't home? What if something was wrong? Mrs. Peterson gave him an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Liam knocked. Silence. Then, footsteps. The door opened slightly, and a tired-looking man peeked out. He had unshaven stubble, dark circles under his eyes, and a look of exhaustion that made him seem much older than his 42 years. "Yes," the man said warily. Liam held up the wallet. "Are you Michael Reynolds?" The man's eyes widened. He yanked the door open fully and stared at the wallet in shock. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice tight. "I found it in the park," Liam said. "I wanted to give it back to you." Michael Reynolds didn't say anything at first. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out and took the wallet. He opened it, saw the photograph, and let out a shaky breath. Then, to Liam's surprise, his eyes filled with tears. "You have no idea how much this means," Michael whispered. Liam and Mrs. Peterson exchanged glances. "What's wrong, sir?" Mrs. Peterson asked gently. Michael swallowed hard and looked at them as if debating whether to tell them. Finally, he sighed and stepped aside. "Please," he said. "Come in. I think you both should hear this." Liam felt a shiver run down his spine. Something told him that this wallet held more than just money. It held a story. Liam hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, glancing up at Mrs. Peterson, who nodded reassuringly. The house was small but tidy, though there was an undeniable air of sadness lingering in the air. The living room had only a worn-out couch, a wooden coffee table, and a few scattered toys on the floor. Michael Reynolds sat down heavily, running a hand through his unkempt hair. He held the wallet tightly, as if afraid it would disappear. His eyes were red-rimmed, filled with emotion. "This wallet," he began, his voice hoarse, "was all I had left." Liam and Mrs. Peterson exchanged a puzzled look. Michael exhaled deeply, staring down at the photograph inside the wallet, the one of him with 2 smiling children. "My kids," he whispered. "Emily and Jake." He traced the image with his fingers before looking up at them. They were my world. Liam felt a lump form in his throat. "Were?" he asked hesitantly. Michael swallowed hard, his hands gripping the wallet tighter. 3 months ago, we were in a terrible car accident." His voice broke. "A drunk driver ran a red light and hit us head-on." Liam's breath hitched. "I survived, but my children—" His voice trailed off, and he covered his face with one trembling hand. Liam felt a sudden, overwhelming sadness. He didn't know what to say. Mrs. Peterson placed a gentle hand on Michael's shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she murmured. Michael sniffed and let out a heavy sigh. "After the accident, everything fell apart. My wife, she couldn't handle the grief. She left." His voice was hollow. "I lost my family, my job, my home." Liam's eyes widened. "You mean you don't live here?" Michael shook his head. "This used to be my parents' house. I came here today hoping to borrow some money. But they're not here anymore either." Liam suddenly realized why Michael had looked so exhausted when he opened the door. He wasn't just tired, he was homeless. "I had just enough money left for a motel room," Michael continued. "That's why I was at the park today. I stopped to rest. And then I realized my wallet was missing." His lips trembled. "That wallet is the only thing I have left of my children." Liam's heart clenched. He suddenly understood why Michael had been so emotional. The money inside the wallet wasn't just cash. It was his last hope. Liam took a deep breath. "Mister, I'm really glad I found it." Michael gave him a small, broken smile. "Me too, kid. Me too." But before they could say anything else, there was a loud knock at the door. Michael stiffened. His expression changed from sadness to something close to fear. "Who is that?" Liam asked. Michael stood up slowly, staring at the door as another knock echoed through the house. "I think," he said in a low voice, "that trouble just found me." Michael hesitated before moving toward the door. His body tensed, and Liam could tell that whoever was on the other side wasn't just a casual visitor. Was it the man from the park? Liam instinctively stepped closer to Mrs. Peterson, who placed a protective arm around him. Another knock, louder this time. Michael exhaled deeply, squared his shoulders, and pulled the door open. Standing on the porch was a tall man in a black suit, his face unreadable behind a pair of dark sunglasses. He held a black leather folder in one hand and looked down at Michael as if assessing him. "Michael Reynolds?" the man asked in a crisp, professional tone. Michael clenched his jaw. "Who's asking?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "My name is Andrew Calloway. I'm a lawyer, representing a client who's been looking for you." Michael blinked. "A lawyer?" Liam and Mrs. Peterson exchanged a confused glance. Andrew Calloway nodded. "May I come in?" Michael hesitated before stepping aside. "I don't have much to offer, but—" "Sure." The lawyer stepped inside, his sharp gaze sweeping the room. He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself, then turned his full attention to Michael. "My client has been searching for you for several months," Calloway said, flipping open the leather folder. "She was worried when you disappeared after the accident. She wanted to help, but she had no way of reaching you." Michael frowned. "Who's your client?" The lawyer handed him a piece of paper. Michael took it and read the name, and immediately turned pale. No, he whispered, shaking his head. This can't be real. Liam and Mrs. Peterson leaned forward, trying to catch a glimpse of the name, but Michael was gripping the paper too tightly. She has been looking for you, Mr. Reynolds, Calloway continued, and she has something for you that will change everything. Michael's voice was barely above a whisper. I don't understand. Why now? Calloway adjusted his sunglasses. Because she just found out that you're homeless, and she refuses to let you suffer any longer. Michael's hands trembled. His breath came in short, shaky gasps. Liam tugged at Mrs. Peterson's sleeve. Who do you think it is? He whispered. Mrs. Peterson shook her head. I don't know, Liam, but I have a feeling this is big. Michael finally looked up, his eyes brimming with emotion. What does she want? Calloway's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. To give you back everything you lost. Michael's hands trembled as he gripped the paper. His mind raced with emotions, disbelief, shock, and something else he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Liam watched in silence, barely breathing. He knew something big was happening, but he didn't understand why Michael looked so shaken. Michael finally found his voice. Where is she? Calloway exhaled. She's waiting at my office. She asked me to find you first, to make sure you were ready to see her. Michael let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Ready? I don't think I'll ever be ready for this. Mrs. Peterson stepped forward gently. Michael, who is it? He turned the paper around, and Liam squinted to read the name. Margaret Reynolds. Liam frowned. Who's Margaret Reynolds? Michael swallowed hard. She's my mother. A stunned silence filled the room. Mrs. Peterson gasped. I thought your parents had passed away. Michael shook his head, his voice thick with emotion. My father passed years ago, but my mother and we had a falling out. We haven't spoken in almost 15 years. Liam furrowed his brows. But if she's your mum, why didn't she help you before? Michael let out a shaky breath. Because I never told her what happened. After the accident, after I lost everything, I was too ashamed to go to her. I thought... He paused, rubbing his temples. I thought I had to handle it alone. Calloway cleared his throat. Your mother only recently learned about your situation. She's been searching for you ever since. And now that she's found you, she's prepared to do whatever it takes to help. Michael hesitated, uncertainty clouding his face. I don't know if I can face her after all this time. Calloway's voice softened. Mr. Reynolds, your mother doesn't care about the past. She just wants her son back. Michael's shoulders sagged. He had spent so long living in the shadows of his pain, carrying his burdens alone. Could he finally let someone in? Liam stepped closer. Mister, I think you should go see her. Michael looked down at the little boy who had changed everything. Liam had found his wallet, returned it without hesitation, and now stood there with those same kind, unwavering eyes. He sighed. All right, I'll go. Calloway nodded approvingly. Good. My car is outside. We can leave immediately. Michael hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Let's go. As he stepped toward the door, Liam suddenly reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. He held it out to Michael. Here, Liam said shyly, in case you need it. Michael's heart clenched. He blinked back tears as he gently pushed the bill back into Liam's hand. Keep it, kid. You've already given me something way more valuable. Liam tilted his head. What's that? Michael smiled, his voice filled with gratitude. A second chance. Michael sat in the passenger seat of Calloway's sleek black sedan, staring out the window as the city blurred past. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind replaying memories he had buried long ago. The last time he had seen his mother, they had parted on bad terms. He had been young, reckless, convinced that he could build a life on his own without her help. But life had a cruel way of humbling people. He sighed deeply, rubbing his hands together. "You all right?" Calloway asked without taking his eyes off the road. Michael hesitated before answering. "I don't know. It's been 15 years. What if she's changed? What if she doesn't recognize me?" Calloway smirked. "Trust me, she'll recognize you. A mother never forgets her child." Michael swallowed hard and nodded. He wanted to believe that. The car ride felt endless. Every turn, every stoplight felt like another chance to turn back. But he didn't. Eventually, they pulled up to an elegant brownstone building in a quiet neighborhood. It looked well kept, surrounded by neatly trimmed hedges and blooming flowers. Calloway parked and turned to Michael. "She's waiting inside. Take your time." Michael's fingers clenched into fists. His feet felt heavy as he stepped out of the car and walked toward the front door. With a deep breath, he raised his hand and knocked. The door swung open almost immediately. And there she was, Margaret Reynolds. Her once dark hair was now streaked with silver, her face lined with the passage of time. But her eyes, those same soft, deep blue eyes, hadn't changed. They widened in shock as she took him in. "Michael!" Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. Michael's throat went dry. He tried to speak but found himself unable to. Then, before he could react, she stepped forward and pulled him into a tight embrace. "Oh, my boy," she sobbed, clutching him as though afraid he'd disappear. Michael stood frozen for a moment before his arms slowly wrapped around her. He felt the weight of all those lost years, all the regret and pain, collapse into this single moment. "I'm so sorry," he finally choked out, his voice breaking. Margaret pulled back just enough to cup his face in her hands. "You don't have to be sorry, sweetheart. You're here now. That's all that matters." Michael let out a shaky breath, nodding. I didn't know how to come back." Margaret smiled through her tears. "Then let's start fresh, right here, right now." Michael felt something inside him loosen, the years of guilt, the shame, the loneliness. Maybe, just maybe, he could finally come home. Michael sat stiffly on the plush couch in his mother's living room, his hands clasped together, his mind a storm of emotions. The last time he had been in a home like this, warm, safe, filled with the scent of fresh-baked bread and lavender, felt like a lifetime ago. Margaret sat beside him, watching him closely, as if afraid he might disappear. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for his. "I searched for you, Michael," she said softly. "For years." Guilt gripped his chest. I thought you wouldn't want to see me after everything, after the way I left." Margaret shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow. "You were my son then, and you are my son now. Nothing could ever change that." Michael swallowed hard. "I lost everything, Mom. My home, my job, my dignity. I couldn't face you like that." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You never had to be perfect for me, Michael. I just wanted you safe. I would have given anything to help you." The weight of her words settled over him, crushing yet liberating. Margaret took a deep breath and wiped her eyes. "But you're here now, and we're not wasting any more time." She patted his hand gently. "Tell me everything." And so he did. He told her about the accident that had taken his job, the financial downfall that followed, the countless nights sleeping on park benches, and the kindness of strangers who had helped him survive. He spoke of Liam, the little boy who had unknowingly set this reunion in motion. Margaret listened, never interrupting, her grip on his hand tightening when his voice wavered. When he finally finished, she cupped his face with both hands, her expression unreadable. "You are stronger than you know, Michael." He let out a shaky breath. "I don't feel strong, Mom." She smiled, though her eyes glistened. Surviving all of that, and still having the heart to return? That takes strength. Michael let the words sink in. For years he had seen himself as nothing more than a failure, but in his mother's eyes he was still her son, still worthy. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Margaret rose and opened it, revealing Calloway, who gave a small nod. "Mrs. Reynolds, I wanted to check in. How's everything?" Margaret turned to Michael with a knowing smile. "Better than I ever hoped." Calloway exhaled in relief. "That's good to hear. Mr. Reynolds, there's something I need to discuss with you. May I?" Michael frowned but nodded, gesturing for him to sit. As Calloway settled in, he pulled out a folder. "There's more to your mother's search for you than just reconnecting." Michael raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Calloway slid the folder across the coffee table. "Your mother didn't just want to find you. She wanted to help you rebuild your life." Michael hesitated before opening it. His eyes widened as he took in the contents. A deed to an apartment, a job offer, a bank account with his name on it. His head snapped up. "What is this?" Margaret reached over and squeezed his hand. "It's a new beginning, sweetheart. If you'll let me help you." Michael stared at the documents, his heart pounding. He had spent so long thinking he was alone that he had no way out. But maybe, just maybe, he was wrong. Michael sat frozen, staring at the documents on the table. His mind struggled to process what was in front of him. A home, a job, a future. He swallowed hard, his throat tightening. "Mom, I can't accept this. It's too much." Margaret's eyes softened. "You're my son, Michael. It's never too much." Calloway leaned forward. "This isn't charity, Mr. Reynolds. This is an opportunity, one that you deserve." Michael shook his head. "But I haven't earned it. I spent years making mistakes, wasting time. People like me don't just get second chances handed to them." Margaret reached across the table and took his hands in hers. "This isn't just about you, Michael. It's about us. I lost you once, and I won't lose you again." Her voice trembled, but her grip was firm. "Please, let me do this for you." He looked between his mother and Calloway, his heart pounding. For years, he had convinced himself he was alone, that there was no way back from the hole he had fallen into. But here, in this moment, the weight of his past didn't seem so unbearable. His mother still loved him. She still wanted him. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't beyond redemption. His fingers brushed over the deed to the apartment. This place. Where is it?" Margaret's eyes lit up with hope. "Just a few blocks from here. A small, cozy place. Nothing fancy, but it's yours if you want it." Michael let out a shaky breath. "And the job?" Calloway smiled. "An old friend of mine owns a construction company. He's willing to give you a shot. Nothing is guaranteed, but if you show up and work hard, you'll have a steady paycheck." Michael exhaled, his mind still reeling. He thought of Liam, the little boy who had unknowingly set this chain of events in motion. That innocent act of kindness had led him here, to a moment he never thought possible. Finally, he looked up at his mother, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "With all my heart." Michael nodded, his vision blurring. "Then, I'll take it." Margaret let out a choked sob and pulled him into a tight embrace. For the first time in years, Michael allowed himself to believe. He had been lost for so long, but now he was home. It was a quiet morning, the air crisp with the promise of a new beginning. Michael stood in front of his new apartment, his hands stuffed deep into his jacket pockets, his eyes scanning the modest yet welcoming space. He had never imagined he would be here, never imagined that, after everything, he would find himself with the chance to start over. The apartment was small, but it had warmth to it, freshly painted walls, wooden floors, and just enough space for him to make it his own. He could already picture the furniture, the little touches that would make this place feel like home. But more than the physical space, it was the feeling that overwhelmed him, the knowledge that he wasn't alone anymore. He turned around as he heard a car pull up in the parking lot. Margaret's sedan slowed to a stop in front of the building, and she waved enthusiastically as she got out. "How's the place looking?" she called out, her smile brighter than the sun itself. Michael couldn't help but smile back. "It's perfect, Mom." Margaret's eyes softened as she took a few steps forward, her gaze scanning the apartment complex. "I'm so proud of you, Michael. You have no idea how much this means to me." He chuckled softly. "I think I have a pretty good idea." As they stood together outside his apartment, Michael felt the weight of his past slipping away. There would always be scars, always reminders of the mistakes and missed opportunities. But in this moment, he realized that he didn't have to be defined by them anymore. "Are you ready for your first day?" Margaret asked, her voice full of optimism. Michael looked at the small bag in his hand, his first real piece of luggage in years. "I think so." Margaret patted his arm. "You've got this, sweetheart. It's only the beginning." For the first time in a long while, Michael believed her. As they walked back to her car, he glanced at the world around him, the bustling streets, the people rushing to their destinations, and for the first time in years, it didn't seem so daunting. He had been through so much, but he wasn't the same person who had walked away so many years ago. He was stronger, wiser, and most importantly, he was ready to try again. The day of Michael's first shift at the construction company arrived quickly. The air was thick with the early morning fog, the streets still wet from last night's rain. Michael stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting his worn-out shirt and the new boots his mother had insisted on buying him. His reflection stared back at him, a stranger in some ways, but not entirely. This man in the mirror had been broken, lost, but now he was whole again. Margaret knocked lightly on the doorframe. "You look ready." Michael turned and smiled, though a flutter of nerves still gripped his chest. "I'm ready." She smiled back, her eyes full of quiet pride. "I'll be here when you get home. Just take it one day at a time, okay?" Michael nodded, his throat tight. "Thanks, Mom. I don't know what I would have done without you." Margaret reached for him, pulling him into a brief but warm hug. "You don't need to thank me. Just go out there and prove to yourself that you're more than your past." And with that, Michael stepped out into the morning, his first day of work waiting. The construction site was noisy, bustling with activity as workers moved about, shouting to each other, lifting materials and operating heavy machinery. Michael felt a wave of intimidation, but it quickly passed as he walked toward the foreman, a burly man with a thick beard and a friendly smile. "You must be Michael," the foreman said, shaking his hand. "Glad you could join us today. I'm Greg." Michael nodded, the knot in his stomach still present, but manageable. "Thanks for the opportunity." Greg grinned. "You're welcome, but you've got to show us you've got the work ethic. We don't expect perfection right away, but we'll see what you're made of." As Michael took his place on the site, carrying equipment, watching others work, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He knew he was being evaluated, but this wasn't the same as the constant judgment he had faced before. This was different. There was a sense of camaraderie here, of teamwork. He focused on the task at hand, doing his best to keep up with the others, to show that he belonged. Every task was a small victory, lifting the heavy lumber, securing the scaffolding, even sweeping the debris. With each movement, Michael felt a little more confident, a little more sure of himself. By the end of the day, his body ached, his muscles sore from the unfamiliar labor, but there was something else, something unexpected, a sense of pride. Greg clapped him on the back as they gathered to leave for the day. "Good job, Michael. Keep this up, and you'll do just fine here." For the first time in a long time, Michael felt seen. When he walked back to his apartment later that evening, tired but satisfied, he thought of Liam. The boy had never known how much he had changed Michael's life. Maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as harsh as he had believed. Weeks passed, and Michael settled into his new life with surprising ease. His job, though physically demanding, gave him a sense of purpose. He was no longer drifting from day to day, but moving with intention. The small apartment that Margaret had helped him find started to feel more like home. He added his own touches, posters from his favorite sports teams, a mismatched couch he had bought from a thrift store, and some old photos of his family. At work, his efforts didn't go unnoticed. Greg, the foreman, often gave him small tasks with increasing responsibility, testing his limits. Michael's confidence grew. He was more than just a worker. He was becoming part of the team. But it wasn't just work that was changing for Michael. His relationship with Margaret blossomed as well. The dinners they shared, the quiet moments spent talking or watching TV together, reminded him of what he had lost and what he was now beginning to rebuild. One afternoon, Margaret arrived at Michael's apartment with a smile that seemed to carry the weight of good news. "I have something for you," she said, holding out a piece of paper. Michael took it, his brow furrowing as he read it. It was a letter from a local charity that helped people transition back into stable lives after difficult periods. The letter offered to help him with his education, offering scholarships for trade courses in construction and design. "This is for me?" Michael asked, feeling the familiar weight of doubt creep in. Margaret nodded, her eyes bright. "Yes, it is. I think you should consider it, Michael. You've proven yourself, and now you have an opportunity to build on that." The thought of furthering his education hadn't crossed his mind in years. The idea of studying again felt daunting, almost too much to handle. But the prospect of growth, of learning something that could help him rise higher in his field, was too appealing to dismiss outright. "I'll think about it," he said slowly, the seed of possibility planted. Days later, as Michael walked to his job, he passed the same park where he had once found the wallet. The bench he had sat on still stood in the same spot, though the place felt different now, as if a chapter had closed. He sat down for a moment, letting the cool breeze blow through his hair, lost in thought. The sound of small footsteps interrupted his reverie, and when he turned, he was surprised to see Liam, the boy who had unknowingly set all of this in motion, walking toward him. "Hey, Michael!" Liam called out, a wide grin on his face. "I'm glad to see you." Michael stood up, his heart warming. "Liam, I didn't expect to see you here." Liam grinned sheepishly. "I was just coming to the park with my mom. She said I should visit you sometime, so I thought now would be a good time." Michael chuckled, kneeling down to meet the boy's eyes. "Well, I'm glad you did." Liam's gaze drifted to Michael's hands, where he noticed the construction gloves tucked into his jacket. "What's that for?" Michael's smile softened. "Just something I've been working on. You know, building things." Liam's face lit up. "Like a builder?" "Exactly," Michael said, his heart swelling with pride. "I'm building a new life." Liam nodded thoughtfully. "That's cool. You know, I think you're pretty awesome. You didn't have to help me back then, but you did." Michael paused, feeling the weight of Liam's words. "It was you who helped me, Liam. You don't know how much you changed things for me." Liam grinned, his innocence as bright as ever. "I just gave you $1. You did the rest." Michael chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Sometimes a little kindness can go a long way." Liam looked up at Michael with wide eyes. "I think you're right." As they sat together on the park bench, Michael felt something stirring deep within him. A sense of connection, not just with the people in his life, but with the world itself. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it would be his, and with each new day, he was building something stronger than he ever thought possible. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of hard work and quiet victories. Michael found himself waking up each morning with a sense of purpose he had never known before. His shifts at the construction site grew longer as he earned the trust of his colleagues, and Greg began to assign him more complex tasks, offering him more responsibilities. The work was hard, but Michael loved every minute of it. He spent his evenings studying the materials for the trade courses offered by the charity, though he still struggled with the idea of going back to school. His heart wanted to believe in his potential, but the years of failure and disappointment made it hard to trust that he could succeed. Still, the thought of a brighter future pushed him forward, each new lesson a small step toward that elusive dream. Margaret remained his biggest cheerleader, her encouragement a constant presence in his life. "You've come so far already," she would remind him after each long day, her smile never wavering. "Keep believing in yourself." It was a Thursday when Michael received the call that would change everything. He had just returned from work, his muscles sore and tired when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. With a sigh, he answered, still half distracted. "Hello? Is this Michael Reynolds?" The voice on the other end was professional, yet warm. "Yeah, speaking," Michael said, setting his tools down. "This is Grace Carter from the charity. We received your application for the trade course scholarship, and I'm happy to inform you that you've been selected." Michael's heart skipped a beat. He felt his breath catch in his throat. "What? Are you serious?" Grace laughed lightly. "Yes, Michael, we are. You've shown incredible potential, and we believe you're a perfect fit for this opportunity." For a moment, Michael couldn't find words. He had applied on a whim, thinking it was a long shot, and yet here he was, being offered something he hadn't dared to dream about in years. I don't know what to say," he stammered, a mixture of shock and gratitude flooding him. "Say yes," Grace said warmly. "We'd love for you to start the program next month. You'll have access to top-notch instructors, and we'll help you with everything, including textbooks and supplies. All you need to do is bring your determination." Michael's vision blurred as tears began to sting his eyes. He thought about all the times he had nearly given up, all the nights he'd spent wondering if there was any hope left. Now, here it was, the opportunity he had been waiting for. "I'll do it," Michael said, his voice steady now, though it trembled with emotion. "I'll do whatever it takes." Grace's voice was full of pride. "That's the spirit. We're thrilled to have you on board." After the call ended, Michael sat in silence, his mind racing. He thought of the long journey it had taken to get here, the hard work, the setbacks, the moments of doubt. But now it all seemed worth it. As he stood and paced the room, his phone buzzed again. It was a text message from Margaret. "I'm so proud of you, Michael. I always knew you had it in you." Michael smiled, a tear slipping down his cheek. He quickly typed back, "I couldn't have done it without you." It was true. Margaret had been his anchor, his constant support. And now, thanks to the small acts of kindness that had helped him rediscover his worth, Michael was standing on the threshold of a new chapter in his life. That night, as he sat on his couch with the letter from the charity in his hands, He thought of Liam. The little boy who had given him $1 all those months ago had no idea just how far that simple act of kindness had gone. It had been the spark that lit a fire within him, a fire that was still burning bright. The next morning, as Michael arrived at work, he noticed Greg standing near the site's entrance, a smile on his face. "You look like a man with something to celebrate," Greg said. Michael grinned. "I've got big news. I got into a scholarship program. I'm going to be studying construction and design." Greg's eyes widened. Then he clapped Michael on the back. "That's fantastic, kid. I knew you had something special about you. You're going places, Michael. Keep at it." As Michael stood there, feeling the warmth of Greg's approval, he realized something important. He wasn't alone in this journey anymore. He had people who believed in him, and that made all the difference. With each passing day, Michael's life became more rooted in the possibilities of the future. He dove into his trade course studies with determination, waking early to study before work, and pushing himself through the evenings to stay on top of assignments. The lessons he learned in the classroom were reinforced on the job, where he could see the immediate applications of the theories and skills he was gaining. At the construction site, his new knowledge gave him confidence. He started applying innovative methods to his work, impressing his colleagues and even Greg. His progress was undeniable. He wasn't just a worker, he was becoming a craftsman. The prospect of building his future in a way he had never imagined before energized him. But it wasn't just work and study that shaped his growth. There was something about the support of those around him that added an invaluable layer to his transformation. Margaret continued to stand by him, offering words of encouragement and celebrating his milestones, no matter how small. The connection they had deepened, their bond growing as they shared more than just words. Lives were intertwining. Michael had never allowed himself to believe that he deserved happiness, but slowly, with every step he took toward his goals, he began to accept that he was worthy of the life he was creating. The past no longer weighed him down. Instead, it served as a reminder of just how far he had come. One rainy Thursday evening, Michael returned home to find a surprise waiting for him. As he opened the door to his apartment, he found Margaret sitting at his kitchen table, a smile on her face and a small package wrapped neatly before her. "I've got something for you," she said, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Michael raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "Open it and see," she urged, watching eagerly as he unwrapped the package. Inside was a set of high-quality tools, a hammer, measuring tape, and a tool belt, all engraved with his initials. Michael's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't expected anything like this, but the gesture was overwhelming. "Margaret, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I know how hard you've worked. You've earned this," she said, her voice filled with pride. "These tools are for the future you're building." Tears stung Michael's eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. He had come so far, and now it felt like everything was falling into place. The next day, as Michael was heading to work, he saw Liam and his mother walking through the park again. Liam spotted him and rushed over, as energetic as ever. "Michael, guess what? I just got a puppy," Liam exclaimed, practically jumping up and down. "His name is Max, and he's a golden retriever. Do you want to meet him?" Michael laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Of course. I'd love to meet him." As Liam's mother smiled, watching them chat, Michael realized just how much his life had changed. He wasn't just a man rebuilding his career, he was becoming part of a community again. The little moments, like talking to Liam or receiving gifts of encouragement from those who cared about him, made it clear that he wasn't alone anymore. "Max is going to love you," Liam said enthusiastically, tugging Michael toward his home. Michael chuckled, but as he walked with them, he felt a deep sense of contentment, the kind he hadn't experienced in years. His journey wasn't over, and there were still challenges ahead, but he was no longer standing in the dark. He was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, he could see the bright horizon ahead. Later that afternoon, after meeting the adorable puppy and laughing with Liam, Michael returned home to find a letter on his doorstep. The return address was from the charity, and his heart skipped a beat as he tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter of congratulation and confirmation. Michael had been selected for a paid apprenticeship with a prestigious construction firm, one that specialized in building sustainable homes. It was a dream opportunity, the kind he had never imagined for himself, but now saw as an achievable reality. With the apprenticeship, he would learn from some of the best in the industry, gaining experience and connections that could propel his career to new heights. It was more than just a job. It was a chance to prove to himself and to others that he was capable of greatness. As Michael sat down on his couch, overwhelmed with the weight of everything that had happened, he felt a familiar surge of gratitude. This was the life he had built, through hard work, kindness, and belief. He was no longer the man who had stumbled through life, aimlessly drifting. He had purpose. He had drive. And most importantly, he had hope for the future. As the days turned into weeks, Michael's life continued to evolve in ways he never imagined. His apprenticeship with the construction firm proved to be everything he hoped for and more. Each morning, he would wake up early, eager to get to work. His colleagues, many of them seasoned veterans, were quick to notice his enthusiasm and drive. They took him under their wing, teaching him the ropes and helping him perfect his craft. Michael soaked in every bit of knowledge, his mind expanding with each new lesson. The days were long, often stretching late into the evening, but Michael didn't mind. He could feel the weight of his past slowly melting away as he built a future that was full of possibility. The skills he was learning were more than just tools for his trade. They were tools for life, teaching him the value of perseverance, teamwork, and self-belief. Margaret continued to be his unwavering support, always cheering him on, always reminding him that he was capable of achieving great things. Their bond grew deeper, and Michael found himself not only relying on her for emotional support, but also enjoying her company more than he ever thought possible. They laughed together, planned for the future, and found joy in the little moments that made life worth living. Michael had become part of a team, both at work and at home. He was no longer a solitary figure, struggling to make sense of his life. He had a community now, one that encouraged and believed in him, and that community extended beyond just Margaret and his co-workers. One sunny Saturday afternoon, after a particularly grueling week, Michael decided to take a break from work and visit the park where he had first met Liam. He figured it would be a nice way to unwind, and the thought of seeing the boy and his golden retriever, Max, made him smile. As he arrived at the park, he spotted them right away. Liam was running around, Max happily following him in playful circles. Michael couldn't help but laugh at the sight. Liam noticed him and ran over. "Hey, Michael, want to see Max do a trick?" Michael nodded, grinning. "Sure, show me what he's got." Liam knelt down and whispered something to Max, who immediately sat up, waiting eagerly for the next command. With a smile, Liam said, "Max, jump!" Without hesitation, Max leaped into the air, twisting and spinning in a perfect circle before landing gracefully on the ground. Michael clapped, impressed. "That's amazing, buddy. Max is one talented dog," Michael said, giving the dog a scratch behind the ears. Liam beamed with pride. "Yeah, he's the best. I think he's going to be a superstar someday." Michael laughed and sat down on the nearby bench. "I think so too." As he sat there, watching Liam and Max play, Michael felt a deep sense of peace. This was the life he had worked so hard to build. It wasn't just about the career or the apprenticeship. It was about these moments of joy, the simple pleasures that made everything worthwhile. The sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the park, and Michael felt a sense of gratitude wash over him. He was no longer defined by his past mistakes or failures. He was defined by his actions now, by the person he had become, and he couldn't wait to see where the road ahead would take him. As he stood to leave, Liam ran up to him, holding something in his hand. "Here, Michael, I want you to have this," Liam said, his face serious. Michael looked at the small object in Liam's hand. It was a wooden coin, intricately carved with a small symbol on it. "What's this?" Michael asked, intrigued. "It's a good luck coin," Liam explained. "My grandpa gave it to me, and I want you to have it. I think it'll bring you even more good things." Michael felt a lump form in his throat. The gesture was so simple, yet so meaningful. It was a reminder that kindness and goodwill could come from the most unexpected places. He took the coin from Liam's hand, holding it gently in his palm. "Thank you, Liam. I'll carry it with me always." Liam smiled. "I'm glad you like it." As Michael walked away, the weight of the coin in his pocket felt like a promise, one he intended to keep. He would continue to work hard, to strive for more, and to build a future he could be proud of. He would also carry with him the lesson that sometimes even the smallest acts of kindness could change everything. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, Michael knew that the journey was far from over. It was just beginning. As Michael's life continued to unfold in ways he could never have imagined, he realized that his journey wasn't just about his own transformation. It was about the people he met along the way, the ones who had touched his life and helped him rediscover his own sense of purpose. And now it seemed that his actions, too, were beginning to affect others in ways that brought a deeper sense of fulfillment to his heart. One evening, after a long day of work, Michael received a message from Greg. He had invited Michael to an informal gathering of the construction crew, a way to unwind after the week's hard work. Initially hesitant, Michael remembered how much he had grown in the company of his co-workers and realized this might be an opportunity to bond with them even further. He agreed. At the gathering, the atmosphere was light, filled with laughter and stories of the day. Michael found himself engaged in conversations with people he had once seen only as distant colleagues. As the night wore on, Greg raised his glass, signaling for everyone's attention. "I just want to say something," Greg began, his voice steady but carrying an air of seriousness. "There's someone here tonight who's shown us all what it means to never give up, no matter what life throws at you. Michael, your work ethic, your dedication, hell, the way you treat everyone is something we should all learn from." Michael felt a wave of humility wash over him as all eyes turned to him. It wasn't the kind of attention he was used to, but it was a recognition he had come to value in the most unexpected way. Greg continued. "We've all been through our own struggles, and we've seen how Michael has fought through his. He's earned the respect of this crew, and he's earned a damn good future." The room erupted into applause, and Michael, overwhelmed by the unexpected praise, stood up to give a small, humble thanks. "I appreciate all of you, more than I can put into words. You've all been there for me, even when I didn't think I deserved it." The night went on with a sense of camaraderie and respect, but Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had shifted. It wasn't just about his personal growth anymore. It was about how his journey had impacted those around him. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't just rebuilding his life. He was contributing to something bigger than himself. The following day, as Michael continued to dive deeper into his work and studies, he noticed small changes in the people around him. His apprentice friends, some of whom had always been quiet or reserved, began opening up, sharing their own struggles and victories. Michael's story had become a beacon of hope for them, and they too began to push themselves further. It wasn't long before one of his co-workers, a man named Jason, approached him after a long day of work. "Hey, Michael," Jason said hesitantly. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said a while ago, about pushing through when things seem impossible. I've been going through a tough time at home, and I didn't know if I could keep going with this. But seeing you, hearing what you've been through, it made me realize I can make it through too." Michael, who had always struggled with expressing his emotions, simply put a hand on Jason's shoulder. "You can do it, man. Don't give up. We're all in this together." In that moment, Michael realized that the ripple effect of his own transformation wasn't just shaping his own life. It was inspiring others to believe in themselves too. As the months passed, Michael's life continued to gain momentum. He became more proficient in his craft, and his apprenticeship turned into a full-time job offer from the company, who was impressed not only with his skill, but with his work ethic and leadership potential. With this offer, Michael could see the culmination of all his hard work. The dream of owning a home for himself, of living a life he could be proud of, was no longer a distant hope. It was a tangible reality. And yet, he still knew that his journey wasn't just about building a career or a house. It was about building connections and creating a legacy of kindness and perseverance. One day, after another successful day at the construction site, Michael sat in his car, reflecting on everything he had achieved. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Margaret, as always, sending him words of encouragement. "I'm so proud of you," the text read. "You're not just building houses, Michael. You're building a future for so many people, including yourself." Her words resonated with him in a way that brought everything into focus. He was indeed building more than just a structure. He was laying down the foundation for a life filled with purpose, love, and community. And a few weeks later, Michael invited Margaret to dinner to celebrate not just his new job, but everything they had worked through together. As they sat across from each other, enjoying a quiet moment, Michael couldn't help but think back to that day when he had found the wallet in the park. He had no idea that a small act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would lead him to this point in his life. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for all that had happened, the people he had met, the lessons he had learned, and the new opportunities that lay ahead. "This is just the beginning," he said softly, to no one in particular, as he clinked his glass with Margaret's. She smiled, her eyes full of love and pride. "And we're just getting started." The future was theirs to shape, and Michael knew that with every step forward, he was becoming more than the sum of his past. He was becoming the person he was always meant to be. Michael's journey was far from over. As he looked around at the people in his life, the ones who had supported him through thick and thin, he knew that the next chapter was waiting to be written. The opportunities before him were vast, and the life he had worked so hard for was finally beginning to take shape in ways that exceeded his expectations. As his new job at the construction company solidified, Michael found himself spending more time at the site, taking on larger projects and gaining the respect of his peers. The old doubts, the insecurities that had plagued him for so long, were now distant memories. The man he had once been, struggling to find his way, had transformed into someone confident, driven, and full of purpose. Yet, as much as the work was fulfilling, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he was destined to do more than just build homes. He was meant to build something larger than himself. There were still so many people in need of inspiration, guidance, and the hope that he himself had once sought. His transformation was a story he felt compelled to share, not just with the people who knew him, but with the world. It wasn't long before Michael decided to take a bold step. He began writing a blog, chronicling his experiences, his setbacks, and the lessons he had learned along the way. Each post was a reflection of his growth, his resilience, and the strength he had found within himself. The more he wrote, the more he realized how much he wanted to help others who were facing challenges similar to the ones he had once struggled with. One evening, as Michael sat at his desk, typing out another blog post, he received an email from Greg, his mentor. Greg had been following Michael's progress, not only at the construction site, but also with his newfound passion for writing and sharing his story. "You've got something special, Michael," the email read. "I think it's time to take your story to the next level. Have you ever thought about writing a book?" The idea hit Michael like a bolt of lightning. A book? It was something he had never considered, but suddenly it felt like the natural next step in his journey. He knew that the story he had to tell wasn't just his own. It was the story of countless people who had faced adversity, who had felt lost and hopeless, only to find their way again. It was a story of redemption, resilience, and the power of never giving up. He spent the next several months working tirelessly on his book, pouring his heart into every page. It was an emotional process, revisiting the darkest moments of his life and transforming them into lessons of hope. The writing was cathartic, and as he wrote, he realized that he wasn't just documenting his journey for others. He was reaffirming his own belief in the power of change. When the book was finally finished, Michael sent it off to several publishers, unsure of what to expect. He had no illusions about the world of publishing. It was competitive, and success was far from guaranteed. But he had learned to trust the process and to believe that whatever happened, it would be part of his larger story. To his surprise, just a few weeks later, he received an offer from a publisher. They believed in his story and wanted to help him share it with the world. Michael's heart raced as he read the email, realizing that this was the culmination of everything he had worked for. It wasn't just a book deal. It was an opportunity to make an even greater impact on people's lives. The release of his book, titled Building a New Life, One Step at a Time, was a pivotal moment for Michael. It was more than just a personal accomplishment. It was a beacon of hope for others who were struggling, searching for the strength to overcome their own obstacles. As the book gained traction, Michael began receiving messages from readers all over the world. Some shared their own stories of transformation. Others thanked him for the inspiration to keep going, even when things seemed impossible. Every message reaffirmed what Michael had always known. His purpose was not just to build structures, but to build lives, his own and the lives of others. With the success of his book, Michael's visibility grew. He was invited to speak at conferences, to share his story with groups of people who were struggling with similar challenges. His message resonated deeply with people from all walks of life, and he found himself connecting with individuals who had once felt just as lost and hopeless as he had. It was at one of these conferences, in front of an audience of hundreds, that Michael realized just how far he had come. He stood on stage, looking out at the faces of people who were hanging on his every word, and for the first time he felt truly proud of the man he had become.